guys, and welcome back. Today on the show we're going to do something just a little bit different. No wood involved, but it's still a shop project nonetheless. It seems to be that there's a big trend going around. It's been going around for a few years of one of these, and that would be a GoPro camera to catch your action shots when you're cycling or rollerblading or whatever the heck it is you do out there. But the mounts for them are brutally expensive. So we're going to try some experimentation today with some of this UHMW polyethylene. And we're going to try to make some GoPro mounts, and hopefully this will help those woodworkers of you out there that already have a camera like this to make your own mounts. So let's give it a try. So this here is the piece that we're going to be trying to duplicate. I'll see if I can get in close to give you a shot of that. It seems that no matter what kind of mount that you want or that you need, even the homemade ones, they seem to all call for one of these things, or the base plate, or a tripod mount, or what have you. So I don't see any reason why we couldn't duplicate these grooves in a piece of this UHMW. And just FYI, UHMW stands for ultra high molecular weight polyethylene. It's basically plastic. It's great for jigs, low friction, but we're going to use it for this. I think our first step that we really need to do on this is to take some measurements off the original GoPro mount. What we want to do is start with our main dimension here as to the size of stock that we want to start with on this. And looking at this piece, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go 1 9/16 square on my version of this. So that'll be our starting point. 3/4 of an inch thick. And from there now we're going to go ahead and take the measurements with some calipers of these fins. Alright, so I've taken some measurements here, and it would appear that these gaps here, I've measured them with some digital calipers, but these two interior gaps, which are the crucial measurements here, are 1/8 of an inch wide, with the center post, which is another crucial measurement, being 9/64 thick. The outside posts are each 7/64. So that would be for a total of 9/16 across the whole piece of the 3 fingers and the 2 gaps. With that being said, we're going to take their 9/16 away from our 1 9/16, and that's going to leave us a 1/2 inch on either side to play with. So let's start with that. So what I've done here is I've marked 1 9/16 along the edge here just to show me my length of my GoPro mount, and I've also marked the center at 25/32 of an inch. I know these are funky measurements. I should probably switch it up to something a little more workable, but I mean, you can do that if you like. The only reason I'm doing these kind of measurements is I want to keep it as close to the original as I can. Either way, pencil doesn't show up very well on this polyethylene, so you may want to use a scratch awl and just give it a little mark, and then you can see it in different angles. So I'm going to carry on. I'm going to mark a center line on both the 1 9/16, and I'm going to mark exactly where my block is, and then I'm going to lay out the design or the mark for the curves that I'm going to need to cut in order to get these pieces the way that I need them for this GoPro mount. I know I'm not explaining this very well, but I am flying by the seat of my pants, so I'm kind of hoping it's going to come together in the end. Work with me here, will you? Alright, so through a lot of editing, I've kind of taken out some of my measuring screw-ups and whatnot, because I gotta tell you, it didn't go very well. Dealing with 1 9/16 and 7/64 and all kinds of strange measurements, it got a little bit haywire and a little bit silly. So I'm gonna go in the keep it simple, stupid method here. And I think what I'd like to do is on either side of my fake camera mount, I'd like to have a 1/2 inch on this side and a 1/2 inch on this side. So I'm going to start off by running my polyethylene through the saw, and I'm going to cut a rabbet in it that will be a 1/2 inch deep and a 1/2 inch wide. So how'd you like that helmet cam action? You might be seeing a bit more of that on the show. Anyway, so we've got our 1/2 inch rabbet here, and this now is going to mimic the side edge of our GoPro mount. So now what we need now is that fin, which is 7/64 thick. Then we need a 1/8 of an inch dado. So I'm going to go ahead and cut that. We're going to mark in 7/64 into the edge, and we're going to cut that fin, and then we're going to just inch it over just a bit to get our 1/8 of an inch gap. The reason I have a a rabbet on both sides is I'm assuming this is going to work, and I'm throwing caution to the wind here, and I'm hoping to get 2 mounts out of this one piece. Okay, so it took a few adjustments, but you can see here, let me just zoom in, there we go, 7/64 for that one fin. So now I'm going to spin it around, and now that I've done all the adjusting, I'll cut the fin on this other side here. Alright, so we got our first set of fins cut, and this is the kerf here from the blade. Now, of course, we measured earlier and we found that gap needs to be 1/8 of an inch thick. Now, this particular kerf of the blade is not 1/8, so we're going to go over to the table saw, do some slight adjustments here to get that kerf to be cutting at 1/8 of an inch. We've got both kerfs cut now, and they both measure 1/8 of an inch. If we were to test it now against our GoPro as to how it would fit, it seems to be a nice fit. However, we're still not done. We've got more fins to cut. So the center fin is actually 9/64 of an inch. So we're going to measure 9/64, mark it, set up our blade, and again, do the same thing. Do a cut, and then adjust to make the kerf 1/8 of an inch on both sides of our little project here. And then we're going to go ahead and set up for the third fin, which is 7/64 of an inch thick, and we're going to set up our saw and cut that, and then of course continue cutting like we did here at the beginning to get our 1/2 inch lip or rabbet or whatever you want to call it here. But either way, we're going to go ahead now and cut the kerf to give us our center 9/64 of an inch thick fin with a 1/8 of an inch dado, and then again a 7/64 inch fin with a 1/2 inch rabbet all the way to finish off the project. Okay, these old eyes are having problems seeing the markings on this polyethylene. So what I've done is I've scored it. So here's a little tip for you guys that I just learned. Hey, you know, like I said, fly by the seat of your pants. I don't know everything. Anyway, what I've done is I've scored it. I don't know if you can see that there, but then I've taken some chalk and rubbed it into the score. So now the line shows up as a bright white, and it's actually a little more crisp than what this video here is showing, but it sure as heck has just made my life 1,000 times easier. So now we're going to go over and do some work on the table saw. Okay, so we've got something now that looks like this. You guys can't see that. You got something that looks like this. Okay. I tell you, man, when you're cutting this stuff and you're just taking off those little bits to get that 1/2-inch dado here for the little end of these GoPro mounts, I'm telling you, this stuff flying around here is like cotton candy, man. It's everywhere. Anyway, that's with dust collection. I hate to see what would happen if we didn't have the dust collection going. Anyway, I'm really digging the way this is looking. And now we're going to get my mount off of my face shield and I'm going to test it. And then we're going to try to figure out now how to cut for the rest of this, this jig. Alright, so I got the GoPro here and I got our little polyethylene board, and we're just going to push that in there, and that's actually a pretty good fit. I mean, I don't want it too tight, but you still want it as good as the original. I like that fit. I think that looks good. It's solid. It clicks in there nicely. But you don't have any adjustability now because of this flat edge. So what we're going to need to do at this point is duplicate this edge here. And I mean, I'm not above doing it, so I think the best way to do it is tracing. And I think what we're going to do is I'm going to cut these here to the length that I want to get individual pieces, and cut it this way to get our square that I want it from before, and give us a little something a little easier to work with. And I think then we're gonna get into trying to fix this up here and curve it up to get the adjustability that we have with the store-bought version. Okay, so now we've got this. I'm thinking that the next step here would be to drill the hole to make sure that our hole is going to align properly when we want to use this mount with our camera. So with that being said, I'm going to measure that hole, see how big it is, sort of thing, and we're going to drill these out. I also noticed that these little offcuts are pretty much the exact width of the original GoPro mount. So I'm just kind of wondering if a couple of counter-sunk screw holes on either side of this would serve me well. Even here in the shop, you know, a ceiling mount, right? Put your camera there, adjust it facing down, right at the table saw, or what have you. Anyway, don't throw out the offcuts. It looks like these could be good mini mounts. Not to be confused with Minnie Mouse. Okay, you can see here what I've got. I've measured the hole and it's a 3/16. So what I've got here is a stop block set up, and I've got my fence set up so that all I really need to do is sit this in here and drill for my GoPro bolt hole. So when drilling this stuff, you just want to take it slow. I mean, you don't need to crank it through. It does drill really nicely. So just take it slow and drill through all 3 of these fins. Another reason you want to go slow is you don't want to distort the fins so that the holes don't line up. Remember, you're dealing with stuff that's only 7/64 of an inch thick. So, and there we go, there's the first one drilled. So let's take it over and test it and see how it lines up with the camera casing. Okay, so I've tested it, and it actually looks like that hole is a little shy. It's a little tight. I'm going to boost that hole up to a 1/4 inch hole, so I'll take it over to the drill press and fire through a 1/4 inch hole and see how we are at that point. Okay, so what I've done now is I've taken the GoPro original bracket and I've traced it, just that little bevel round piece on a scrap piece of paper. Then I've laid this under a piece of plexi, just 1/16 inch plexi, whatever, and traced it out. And now I'm going to cut this on the scroll saw and adjust it so that it's the same shape as this. what I'm doing is I'm making a template. I'm anticipating making more of these, and making a template now is a good idea. So I'm going to take this over the scroll saw, I'm going to cut out this template, shape it, and then we're going to move on into using our template to transfer our pattern onto these pieces, which we've now tested and everything fits just fine. So here's our GoPro mount, and here is our template. And the object now is to lay your template over, and with a fine black marker or something highly visible, mark that profile out. You should only need to use or mark it on one side, and then we can take it over to the scroll saw and I'll show you how to cut it out, or what I've come up with to cut it out. Hopefully it'll work. Okay, so what I've done here is taken a piece of walnut, it's just a scrap piece, and I've used some hot glue, and I've glued this upright like this to my mount. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this over to the scroll saw and cut out my profile that I drew on the top here for my camera. So let's take it over to the scroll saw and cut that out. Alright, so here we have our mount. I'm not really a fan of the residue that the hot glue left on our mount. I mean, it made it kind of messy looking, but I think on my next one that I cut I might do something a little different, possibly some double-sided tape. That would probably be a better way to go. I'll let you know once I try it. So here is the mount. It's not quite finished yet, but we'll test it out. We can see that it goes on nice and snug. I mean, that's not going anywhere. And our GoPro bolt fits through there nicely. And I just want to show you here the adjustability. You can see here it's fully adjustable. In fact, a little more flexibility than what the store-bought GoPros are, and it's very sturdy. Now, the only thing we're missing, of course, is a nut to attach onto here. So we're going to go over and get a nut and put it on this and carry on. I'll just show you the next little step here. So on this particular GoPro, I'm testing the thread on it, and it's actually a metric thread, and it's a 5.0 metric thread. I don't have any of these nuts in my shop, but I will be picking some up tomorrow to be able to hold this in securely. I don't think you guys need a video of how to put a nut on the other side, but either way, it tests out, go figure, as a metric thread, and it's a 5.0. So as I said before, I want one of these to be a tripod mount. And the tripod that I have, and most of them, seems to be a standard at a 1/4-20 thread for these particular ones. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark the center of the back of this particular mount, and I'm going to drill a 7/16 diameter Forstner bit hole in the back, probably about 1/8 of an inch deep. Maybe a little more. I just want to recess this nut into my GoPro mount, and I'll epoxy that in there. And of course the 7/16 hole didn't really work out too well because I don't have a 7/16 Forstner bit. So I used a 1/2 inch and epoxied that nut in there, and that's it. I'm going to try one, like I said, with the double-sided tape as opposed to the hot glue, so we can get rid of this mess here. And I'll let you know how that works out in just a second. Alright, so I just want to show you how this mounts onto your tripod now. You can see I've drilled the little smaller 3/16 of an inch hole there, which accepts the pin on most tripod mounts. But anyway, you just screw your tripod mount onto your tripod mount as such. Goes in here, snaps in. Of course, then your GoPro will sit like this, and your mounting bolt or your GoPro screw, whatever you want to call it, will go in there. And of course, that's it. You now have fabricated yourself your own GoPro mount without spending big bucks on it, and it seems to work pretty good. And there you have it, your very own shop-made GoPro mounts. They seem to be way more flexible than the store-bought, and you know what, I made this out of a piece of scrap polyethylene, so you can't go wrong. I still need to get those nuts that I referred to earlier in the video. Will I do it again? 100%. Will I make more? Definitely. Would I do it differently? Yeah. One thing I would do is the blade height. I had it at a 1/2 inch to cut the 1/8 inch kerfs, and it turns out that was a little tight. I had to actually get in there with a Dremel and grind it down a little bit to give a little more flexibility. So I would actually add another 1/16 to that and go with a 9/16 blade height for those kerfs. As well, did the double-sided tape work? Yeah, no. It worked, but it was still a gummy, gooey mess. Best method I discovered while playing around, believe it or not, freehand. Slap it up against a piece of board to get yourself a square edge. Hold it nice and firm and cut away. It's a scroll saw. It's not going to take off your fingers. I wouldn't do it on a bandsaw. I wouldn't do that on a table saw by any means. But on the scroll saw, definitely a little bit of freehand. So give it a whirl. I'm kind of new to the GoPro movement, and I'm enjoying it. It's been a lot of fun, and I'm going to, you know, get into it a little more. And these homemade mounts are going to save me quite a few dollars, and they're going to help me out to try different scenarios with my GoPro. So guys, I know it's not woodworking, but hey, you know what? You can't have everything, or maybe you can. Try making your own mount. See you again next week, guys, with who knows, maybe a woodworking video, maybe not. I think it pretty much will be. See you next week.